The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Good morning. There's a new series we're covering here. It's called Patriot Flight Honors Veterans. Our goal is to educate people and even make people aware of what Patriot Flight is. Patriot Flight is part of the National Honor Flight Network, where we take veterans down to Washington, D.C. to visit the memorials. We had a flight on May 10th back in the spring, and we have an upcoming one on September 20th. I am Frank DeSorbo. I'm the president of Patriot Flight. Patriot Flight is made up of a group of volunteers dedicated to bring these veterans down to Washington, D.C. The veterans that we focus on currently are the World War II veterans and the Korean War veterans. They are our young, honored human beings and veterans that this country needs to pay tribute to. And I say needs to because that's how I feel. I will say to you today, I think you will enjoy this program today because I have here with us two veterans of World War II. One of them is who started Patriot Flight back in 2007, and another gentleman here who's been on a flight and is working with Patriot Flight currently as an ambassador. First we have Bill Peak as the founder, and then we have Alan Atwell, who's currently working with us. In essence, you're going to get a little version of the then and now. Bill Peak has started the organization in 2007. Bill, tell us about yourself and what drove you to bring me here today.
Well, back in 2007, I read a short article in our local advertiser that one of our assemblymen wrote about his two sons taking him to Washington, D.C. to see the memorial. And I read that several times and it just touched me. And I went in to my wife and I said, I'm going to Washington. Well, at that point she thought I was crazy, and I probably was. And so I went back and said, no, you can't do that. So I went back and I thought about it a little bit, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll get a busload of veterans and we'll go down to Washington. And her in her wisdom said, you do that. You get a bunch of 80-year-olds on that bus, or 90-year-olds, and you get outside of Albany, half that bus don't want to go to the bathroom. And then when you get to Catskill, the other half is going to want to go. So it'll take you 3 days to get to Washington. I said, well, back I go, and I still was determined that somehow I want to get some veterans to Washington. And my daughter in Rochester had seen a short clip out of Hendersonville, North Carolina, of an honor flight to Washington, D.C. And she taped it and sent it to me. I presented that at a senior center in Troy, and we formed Patriot Flight. Why did I do this? And I've thought about this so many times. During World War II, I was 18 years old. Like all the rest of us, we couldn't wait to get into the service. And I did go. I was down in Mississippi. I went to Camp McCain, brand new camp at the time, and grew up fast. From that, I went to Fort Jackson. They were getting ready to go overseas, and I got into some secret work. In Camp McCain, they put me in radio school. And if it was anything in this world I did not want to do, was be a radio operator. So I did everything to get out. And a gentleman came in, an officer, and he said, I need 2 volunteers. Well, in the Army, you know, you don't volunteer. I volunteered for everything. And people thought I was crazy. But I volunteered and had this little device. It was a field device for encoding or ciphering messages. From there, I went into secret work. I wound up in Memphis, Tennessee at Army headquarters. I taught many, many people come out of the field. And I had a pretty good life. I got married down in Memphis. My wife was with me. And I was more like a civilian. That bothered me all my life. I saw my friends go over and get killed. I saw my friends serve. I sat back here in pretty good shape. 3 years, 10 months, and 2 days. And for most of my life, I was ashamed of the fact I never went overseas and served. That went on for years and years. And my daughter now, married, had 3 children, she's a grown woman. And one day she said to me, "Dad, how come you never stand up when he asked the veterans to stand up?" And I said to her, "I don't belong with them. I'm not worthy of that." And I wouldn't stand up. Several weeks go by and she came back to my home and she had a plaque made up, or a display with I was a master sergeant. And with what few little medals I had, and it was done up well. We sat in my bedroom with her, and and she was talking. She says, "Dad, I want you to remember one thing. You went in the service and you did what you were supposed to do. They told you to do that. You did your job. You did it well." My life changed at that moment. That's what inspired me to see what I could do to bring veterans to Washington. That memorial is such a beautiful place, and there these old men had no chance to get there because it wasn't built. It took 60 years to build it. And then once it was built, they were too old to go down there on their own. That's why I brought them down there. The Patriot Flight was formed. We took our first flight in April, second flight in May of '08. We took a flight in October of '08, and it just rolled on from there. And Frank, I'm sure you know the difficulties that you have raising money, getting organized, getting it together. It's a real tough life. But when you see them come back, it's worth every second of it. I feel now part of the World War II veterans.
I will share with you, you've been such an inspiration to me. Bill and I met, and I'll tell how I met and when we met. I tell the story many times, and I wanted to know more about Patriot Flight. I understood Bill was out of it. So I talked around, and everybody said unfortunately, they said he's elderly. Okay, I like to use the term "we're all aged," okay, which is like fine wine. So I want to know more about Patriot Flight. I have a way, because I know how to track down people. I've tracked down a lot of veterans because I do something to find veterans of the Normandy invasion. So I tracked down his phone number and his home address. I called him on the phone, said to him, "Bill, I'd like to talk to you about Patriot Flight." I hit a heart. I hit heart to heart. He says, "So would I. Anytime." I said, "Well, how about right now? I'm outside your door." He brought me inside, and we spent 3.5 hours talking. Didn't realize it until I was going home that day, that the first half hour he was interviewing me. Can you run an organization? Do you got the spirit? What makes you want to do this? Why have you done it? I told him about the history of what I've done for the Normandy invasion people, putting on an event around D-Day every year that draws in the neighborhood of 300 people. I have found about 70 Normandy invasion people. Just to show you that it's going on now, I just went out to Connecticut, they call it. It's about 100 miles east of Cleveland this past weekend, where they put on a reenactment of the Normandy invasion. History is out there for everybody. There's more than enough history to go around. Bill hit on something that said, at the time, I believe you were what, 82, 83 at the time when you started it? there were more veterans. Right now, you may hear the statistics. You used to hear 1,000, 1,200 a day were dying. It's less than that now. Why? There's fewer and fewer of them. I think it's down around 500 and 600. But let me say to you, they're remarkable people, impressive people. If you got a heart, you're going to feel something. The veterans, when they go on the flight, they experience something, and only they can really experience it. And I use a saying with the Normandy, through their eyes and hearts. And I look at you two and say, you people experience something through your eyes and hearts because you served World War II. You saved the world. Alan Atwell, he's working with us on Patriot Flight, but he's got experience both over there and here today and with us. Alan is currently the Vice President of the Battle of the Bulge Association. And Alan's got quite a few stories that I enjoy hearing. I've come to feel very comfortable in both these people. They've opened my doors, and I will say to you that they are remarkable and they hit the heart. Alan, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Frank. My name is Alan Atwell. I grew up in a small town outside of Elmira called Breezeport, which would be like Jonesville associated with Schenectady. We had a small, it is a small town, it still is, but it had a high school. There were 12 of us that graduated and 3 were already in service. Similar to Bill, the day after my 18th birthday, I went to all the recruiting offices in Elmira trying to volunteer. And for some reason, they were not taking volunteers. But they said if I went to the draft board, maybe they could help me out. Well, lo and behold, within a week's time, I had an official invitation. I have a helmet liner that a friend of mine labeled with all the places that I had visited and was located in during my length of service. So following that, I can give you a quick resume of my background. I was inducted in Camp Upton down on Long Island. From there, I took my basic training. At that time was 17 weeks in Camp Croft, South Carolina. At that time, I weighed about 150 pounds, and with hand-to-hand combat, I was matched up with a 200-pounder. We were practicing hip throws, where you grab a person by the shoulders and throw him over your hip, and to counter that, you stiffen up. I stiffened up. He didn't throw me, but I received a hernia that I got in about my 10th week of training. I wanted to finish training with the fellows that I started with, so that was quite a chore, continuing this with a hernia. And the 25-mile hike almost did me in, but I heard later that the fellows I took my training with ended up on Anzio beachhead in Italy, which would not have been good. I went overseas on the Mauritania, which at that time was the second largest in the world, next to the Queen Mary in size. So we traveled by ourselves, and out in the middle of the ocean one evening, you could feel the ship going back and forth. This is the captain speaking. We made contact with 3 German submarines, and we're taking evasive action. Well, some of the Catholic boys got their beads out and they started talking to themselves, because that would have been a long walk home. I landed on the southwest corner of England in the middle of the night. We traveled across the country, I'm sure in a rainstorm. The next morning we boarded a French small ship that took us to the coast of France. And with the landing nets, we went into LCIs, and I waded ashore on Omaha Beach of Labor Day of 1944. It was 2 months after the invasion, but there was still a lot of debris in the water and on the beaches. I went up through replacement depots and was assigned to a line company of the 28th Division, which is a Keystone division out of Pennsylvania. It was a quiet sector. There was no fighting going on at that moment, but at night your imagination can do many things when you're looking out over the the front lines. But after a couple of days, another fellow and I were ordered back battalion headquarters. It was a beautiful sunny September day like this, and we were ambling along the middle of this field. An 88 shell hit right in front of us. Well, we figured one hit behind us. But you've heard the long and the short. Somebody is getting your range, and the third one is going to be you. You've seen the little characters in the cartoons start doing like this. Well, we covered that field, and the third round never came in, or somebody else might be sitting here. I went up through in the fall of 44. They had the worst weather in decades. It was below zero. I got frostbite in the Hurricane Forest so bad that I couldn't walk. I went to an aid station, and they transported me to a hospital in Spa, Belgium. I'm sure I was carried in on a litter. There's no treatment then, or is there now? You just lay on an army cot with your bare feet sticking out, and if they turn black, they cut them off. I remember being ordered down to this room one day, and thinking about it, I'm sure it must have been a seminar of doctors, because there's no treatment then, nor is there now. They helped me up onto a table, took a needle and stuck in my toes to show that I didn't have any feeling. Okay, yeah, well, you're dismissed. December 16th, the Battle of the Bulge happened. They emptied the hospital out, and everybody that could walk was on their way back to the front. I got as far as Neuchâtel, Belgium, on my way to Bastogne as a return as a rifleman, when they asked me if I wanted to be an MP. Well, I made a quick decision, and I'm sure that's why I might be here today. It's interesting that Neuchâtel, the only thing I can remember about that, and I was there in December of 44, is that in the center of the town there was a big bomb crater with a whole bunch of funny colored wires sticking up out of the ground. Interesting enough, a month after I got out of service, I went to work for a New York telephone company and became a cable splicer, splicing those wires. I remember seeing General Patton go by when I was in Neuchâtel, and he certainly looked the part with a sheepskin jacket and his ivory pistols. I'm sure I gave him a salute, and I don't recall whether it was returned. But interesting enough, I became acquainted with a reenactor, which is a fellow that liked to play soldier and wasn't old enough. And he and his friends have contact in Neuchâtel, and September 21st, which is the day after our next flight, they're dedicating a monument in Neuchâtel to the 28th Division. It will be located in front of a building that at that time had been the division headquarters for the 28th Division. I was there 70 years ago, and my oldest daughter and I have tickets to attend a dedication, and I'm curious to see how many others may be there that were there that long ago. From Neuchâtel, we went to St. Marie aux Mines. I remember that day very clearly. It was January of 45, and Ed Slovak, the only soldier that was shot for desertion in World War II, was shot that day. He didn't deny deserting, and he would have been pardoned if he had returned to the front, but he refused, and a decision to prosecute him was given to the company commander, battalion, regimental division, and it went up to Eisenhower. And there had been other desertions, and Eisenhower was going to make an example of him. And he was the only soldier shot in World War II. And I can still remember those three volleys echoing back and forth at that day, and we knew what had happened. From there, we went to Colmar, southern France, and it's interesting that the 28th Division was associated with the French Moroccans. Their little trick was to sneak out at night, find a German, and cut an ear off. They wouldn't kill him. They just cut an ear off so that they would know how close they were. And that put the scare bejeebers in them, that's for sure. The last one I have is Kaiserslautern. We were there for a week or so, and I remember taking a Jeep and going to Landstuhl, not far away, and that's the only castle I remember wandering through and exploring. I've seen news articles of where they must have a large medical facility in Landstuhl, because I see that veterans are housed there before they return. I returned home, I hired out to the phone company and had a career in that. Interesting enough, about 7 years ago, I received this letter from Belgium. I behaved myself when I was over there. Who's writing me now? Well, it turned out to be a 37-year-old K-9 police officer. He being a reenactor, along with several others of the 28th Division. He assumed the role of an MP in the MP platoon of the 28th Division that I was in 70 years ago. We set up quite a relationship on the internet. It was interesting enough that I gave the information to a reporter of the Schenectady Gazette. She did a front page article. I sent it to Alex, and he said, well, forget the newspaper. You are on our worldwide website. Well, you key up this address, and here's a picture of me in basic training and other pictures that I had sent to him. And I asked him, how come you're a reenactor? He says, our current generation has no idea what their parents or relatives went through in World War II. And this is a way of showing them some of their history. We set up quite a relationship on the internet. He invited me to come over for a visit. I'd have many opportunities, but they would have been all over Europe. And he lived in Brussels, which is where where I was in action. So I went over for about 10 days, stayed with him. He speaks English fluently, so every day we went out to a different museum or battlefield. He came over here the following year with his family, and they've been back several times. And I'm looking forward to going back just about a month from now for this dedication. A few years back, well, it was in '08, I heard about this Patriots flight. And I sent my application in. We assembled in the parking lot of Sam's Sam's store in Latham. I don't remember, there's probably a couple of dozen motorcyclists escorted us to the airport, and I still get very sentimental going through the waiting room when people started clapping. They were clapping for me. That still gets to me. But I enjoyed that. I think it was the most memorable trip I've ever had, thanks to Bill. And this is why I'm involved in Patriots Flight now. I've been there. I know what it is and what it can do for veterans, and become one of their ambassadors to spread the word.
Alan, thank you so much. And I have to say, by having you two here, you're in our small little portion of the world, you exhibit what the greatest generation is all about. I will share something that Bill had said. As much as he felt like it took a while for him to understand what his duty is. And there's two big words that I use a lot, and I say it, one of them is duty. It happens to be a book by that name. It's all about Paul Tibbets. Paul Tibbets was a pilot on the Enola Gay. And in the twilight of his life, the book was written. And I say to you, duty. The other word is sacrifice. That sacrifice, what you guys did, should never be forgotten. You guys saved the world. And I will say to you that my goal is to do everything I can through Patriot Flights. You've experienced the flights. I've experienced the flights. It's something that many people should experience. We're working our way with the World War II. We have a flight on September 20th that we plan on taking 50 veterans. Most of them are going to be World War II veterans. Youngest World War II veteran now, I happen to know because he's a Normandy invasion veteran. He went in when he was 15 years old to the Merchant Marines. He crossed that ocean on Merchant Marines ships at 15. Think about that in today's culture. A 15-year-old. He eventually went on to the Navy and was on an LST. And he's met people at the D-Day things I put on with other LST. The camaraderie that comes out when you people get together is a tribute to you, and it needs to be shared with the public. And people have to do and step forward for you people did your duty and did a sacrifice. And I will share a little story with you with a Korean War vet I ran into. He turned around and said, I said, were you in during the Korean War period? He says, yeah, but I was over in Germany. I says, but you were in during the war period. He says, yeah, but I was over in Germany. I was doing the occupation work. I go, you want to know something? You must have been one of the lucky ones. He goes, what do you mean? You must have told them you didn't want to go to Korea, that you wanted to go to Germany. And he laughed. That's one of the things I love to do. Get these people that are 80 to 96, 90, 100-year-old. I've got a 100-year-old, a couple 100-year-olds I've met. Another story I ran into, the one D-Day event we put on, there were two 100-year-old veterans there in 2013. That fall, the one person, I kind of misled the public. The guy was 99 years old in June, was going to turn 100 in September. Close enough. I promoted him as 100 years old. Well, in September, he has a birthday party. They invite me, a bunch of the motorcycle guys that are the Patriot Guard riders, we're the Patriot Flight, and I got invited to his birthday party in September. Beautiful, beautiful September day. I went up to Gene, that was his name. Gene, how you doing? He says, fine. I says, really? He says, oh, I'm doing fine. He says, I just got done cutting the lawn this morning. 100 years old. And I go, and he's amazed that all the motorcycle guys were there. I showed up. I says to him, you do remember me? He says, oh yeah, you're the guy that started this mess, okay? Meaning all the people. When he came to our event, there was another 100-year-old gentleman, which was remarkable. His name was Eddie. And Eddie was 100 years old, which is another remarkable thing. I've got his notes, 5 pages of little notebook of where he traveled around the world. He was a lieutenant in the Navy. And when I went up to him, I went to see him the day after the event, and he hit the heart. We sat down and talked, and he goes, doesn't speak much, slow to react. He goes, D-Day, next year, 100 years old. I keep in touch with his daughter who lives in Del Mar. What he was remarkable physically in this day and age, 100 years old, he doesn't take any medication. 100 years old, and he just likes to be recognized. There's a 90-year-old veteran I know, one of the best sayings he came out with was, I'm 90 years old, it's really nice that people are still thinking about us. That's my job. That was the then. Let's fast forward now, and I'll say to you that Patriot Flight, we're using a slogan, we're a community of veterans and patriots. The one day we give them is one day that is so remarkable, so memorable. They deserve. I turn around and take the word serve, and I say deserve. You deserve a lot. You deserve a lot more than even one day of memory. It's our time. I will say that September 20th is our second flight. We took one on May 10th where we took 50 veterans. We're scheduled to take 50 again, close to 50, mostly all World War II, ranging in age from 88 to 95, 96, 97. I'm still looking for the first woman that from my D-Day event that was there at D-Day. We took a woman back in the fall who served, like you, Bill, never went overseas, but served in, I guess what you didn't call it the Pentagon back then, the War Department in Washington, D.C. She was in the Navy. And I think she was like 94. And we do put on a video. Last night we had a reunion at the Beltran Center, reunion of the veterans that went on the May 10th flight. So we don't just give the flight and then fly away. We give the flight to work with the community. Our upcoming event on September 20th, the event of the send-off is at 6 o'clock in the morning at CBA, a little different than what some people may be familiar with. But it gives us open space to put the veterans up in front. We have a little parade out of CBA. It's held on the basketball court. It is remarkable to see the honor and the tribute that you people deserve. On our flight on May 10th, we returned home and gave each person a plaque. Each one of the veterans received a plaque. I found out from doing the D-Day event. I gave a plaque the first year. And for some reason, some of these people go home and put these on the wall and they display them. And believe it or not, when I did it with the D-Day event, it also was a method that two veterans came together later on. It was a story that was written in the Times-Union, because I went to Terry Brown, who does the military. The plaque wound up, two people were in a rehabilitation center, and the person, I think it was a therapist, went to two different rooms, seen the same plaque. He said, geez, I seen the same plaque in a room with somebody else. And they turned around. I think maybe they pulled some strings. The next thing you know, they're in the same room together. It was really so ironic, and I always say the Lord works in mysterious ways. Not only were they put in the same room together, they sat together on the two ceremonies that I put together for the D-Day veterans. Then they got talking to one another, and you know what else they did? One was the Navy, the other Navy and the Army. They found out they floated across the ocean, which wasn't a pleasant ride, on the same ship together. And so the story goes is that they got to know each other very, very well. They look forward to coming to the event each year for the D-Day veterans. Hope the plaque does the same thing. Hope the plaque does the same thing down the road. It's something that really is touching and really maybe brings the hearts together. I am not a veteran. I come from a family of veterans. An older brother was in Vietnam. Kind of relates to what Bill said. He was on a base in Saigon. He relates to saying, you know, I had it good. I was over in the war, but I got warm meals, warm shower, warm bed. If it was warm over air conditioned probably, or whatever. My other younger brother was in the 9th Infantry Division. He slept in a chicken coop one day because it was dry. He says the chickens drove him nuts. He didn't talk too much about it. He had a tough time after Vietnam. It was frontline combat. I was as close as I was. He told me a few stories. I've got some of them written in a letter. Something I will say to you, that there's a story that he tells in his letter. And I have a World War II friend who's in the 9th Infantry Division. I use that insignia on my card. My email address for Patriot Flight is FOMservice@AOL.com. I give out a business card, and you see the 9th Infantry Division. Just met somebody this past weekend. When I showed him the card, he goes, wow, they had a tough time in World War II. They were one of the highest casualty rates in World War II, as far as the journey that you went, Alan. Because this one particular friend of mine that I talk to almost every day, visit at least once or twice a week, fall asleep in his recliner, and I've got a great rapport with him. I will say to you that he experienced something, and when I tell people, they go, he must have seen something. He was there at Normandy, fought in the Battle of St. Lo. And I hope the young kids learn about the Battle of St. Lo and Normandy and all the World War II events and people. My goal is to get those. But this person then went on to fight in the Battle of the Bulge, one of the first persons to cross the Remagen Bridge into Germany. Was wounded 3 times. Him and my brother tell a story that I won't share with anybody. They will share it together. It's all about life and death. The plaque we gave out says a lot. Simple words. It's a trip of memories, victories, and peace. I say I'll take the word memories first. Memories. I sit here with two people at 90, closing in on 90s. I kid a lot of 90-year-olds. You're in the 90s club. You should be proud of that. Reason I say that, your parents were probably born in the 90s, okay? The 1890s. You were the first baby boomers of World War I. It wasn't called World War I, it was a Great War. Those memories, the first word in memories is the word me. You should think of that. Those memories are about you. You deserve everything. You deserve a lot more. Second word is victories. You went off as kids. You saved the world. You built the country. Boy, we owe you so much. Third word is peace. Both my brother and my buddy and all the warriors I've met, they're so peaceful. From my age, I lived through Vietnam. Almost a very good friend kept me out of the service. I was on a destroyer in World War II. I was 18 years old. I was looking forward to going into Seabees. Didn't want to get drafted, wanted to learn something. He got to know me so well, told me, you want to learn something, go to college. Go to college, go to college. I was a common laborer. He said I was a smart aleck. And personally, in my own personal life, my mother used to yell at me, I'll sign you up at 17. That gives you any indication. My two brothers listened, and I admire them. I will say to you that the peace comes from the fact that being around veterans, talk about peace. They love peace, and that's what you're all about. You guys have done some phenomenal things. I'm here just trying to carry on a legacy that Bill Peake started, and it should be continued. When we call ourselves a community of veterans and patriots, I mean that. The reunion we had last night was just a start of the kinds of stuff we'd like to do. I want to say that there's dedicated people out there, many people. There's these motorcycle people you talk about. Patriot Guard Rider is involved with us on working with me closely on the programs we're putting together. There's programs coming up. I'm working with somebody come September 19th down at the TU Center. The Spirit of America. Something that I thought about down the road is coming to our hometown. I'd love someday for them to put on one that brings the Army band, the Marine band, the Navy band together. Just go on down and listen. Something that is nice out there. The Spirit of America is along those lines. They got the military band, they got a drill team, and some other programs. They got 4 different times. We're looking at the one Friday morning. Our flight is the next day, September 20th. September 19th is known as POW MIA Recognition Day. Seen it on a calendar. Now I'm finding out the actual day is September 20th. What an honor to be going down to Washington, D.C. that day. The POWs and MIA, I've got a contact there. They said they're a smaller organization, and I didn't understand why. Being a non-veteran, I'm learning. I'm learning a lot. And I said, well, weren't there POWs and MIAs in Vietnam? And I've heard of stories. I've been in touch with a person out in the West Coast. We all know John McCain. And I kind of feel as though there's a lot of organizations out there doing a lot of different things. There's no question you guys are the greatest generation. You fought a war to save the world. After those wars, we fought so people have freedom. If you think about every single war after that. But I ran into an interesting story. An individual I ran into told me he was the oldest working employee of New York State. I says, really, Carl? Oh, yeah, I work full-time, blah, blah, and he works in Albany. Try and get him to come to the D-Day event. He didn't, no. He says, I was in the Caribbean. And the first time I met him, he says, I was a baker. I said, it makes no difference what you were. You did your duty. You did what you were told. You were a baker. You were in the Caribbean. So what? Just come. No. He says, just come to the event and be around other veterans. Now, ran into it the second time. Come on, Carl. You didn't come last year. Come this time. Come on. I don't care that you were a cook. I wasn't a cook. I was a baker. You had to make that distinction to me. The humbleness that's come from these people. There's a group through my D-Day World War II veterans, I call them the Omaha Beach Breakfast Club. Why? They all were there on June 6, 1944. And they've gone on honor flights. One of them hasn't gone yet. Believe it or not, there's some World War II veterans that don't want to fly. And I get together with these guys. And I was with them the one day, and the group was around. I go, these guys got there on June 6, 1944, between 6 and 7 in the morning. The one guy who was with the Big Red One Army, he says, we were supposed to be there, but we got pulled back. We didn't get there until about 8 or 8:30. And I go, I will say to you that. How humble can you be? I can't praise you guys enough. I can't be humble enough to be amongst you. Patriot Flight that's what it's really all about, too. It's about bringing those people down there to experience what Alan felt. And I really say, I use a saying with the D-Day, through your eyes and hearts, you guys know what it's like. It's a different feeling for when I go. And yet I've been around these veterans. Maybe I've been blessed by the Lord that I can communicate well with you. I can get a smile out of you. We chuckle a bit. And you can tell me, I get shared the stories. I could go on longer than we have here this morning. I hope that this is continued. Bill, I owe you so much debt of gratitude. I call him my mentor. Call Alan my ambassador. Bill?
You know, on a light note, I have things pop in your head as you listen. And one thing you talked about being in Camp Upton. Remember what they called it? The Frozen Fifth. That was so cold in those tents. You weren't there very long, but when he said that, I said, all of a sudden there's a connect here that I didn't know existed. But I have an interesting story. Of course, I got into the secret work, and one of the things they did was send us to a demolition school, so that if we went into a site, we had to make sure it was secure. So we had to know about booby traps and all that sort of thing. And one of the things that we had to do one night, two of us, we had a lot of fireworks, and our outfit was camping out in the woods, you know, all the tents in line, you know. And we were to get through the line that they had posted and disrupt this camp. So we did. We snuck up on our bellies, you know, young kids, we were having a ball, carrying all these fireworks. And you know these things you light and they shoot up in the air? Roman candles, they used to call them. Well, we had all sorts of these things. So we ran through where the tents were. We pulled the tent stake out, the first tent. And of course, the tent went down. The guys were all struggling inside, you know, and we're having a ball. Because we got through the guards. And it was a tree stump there. And I put this thing on a tree stump, and I lit it, and away I went. And as I went, it went bang. And it caught me right in the butt. Now, I should have gotten the Purple Heart for this, but I didn't. But now I can't tell anyone, because if they found out I was the one that pulled their tent down, they would have probably strung me up. I couldn't say anything, and I had the sorest butt you'd ever imagine. Couldn't go to first aid with this big blister on my can from my fireworks. And that was my experience with demolition. But the one thing I'll say, there was a group of us that went through that school. And my buddy and I were the only two that survived. All the rest got killed. You know, they set the traps off. But it was quite an experience.
I will say to you, I've got a video that I show for the D-Day. I must have seen it 100 times. Just recently I seen something else. You know, you see something every time you pick up something? I'm going to ask Alan something here in a second. I was amazed at a lot of the photos that I show in that video. Show the veterans that are over there in frontline combat taking group photos that had smiles on their face. You know, as bad as it may have been, and I'll just tell one story, and I'm sure Alan can tell a few. My brother tells a story, the one who was in the 9th Infantry out there in the jungle. When he got dropped from the helicopter, they dropped him in a watermelon patch. The watermelons were the small ones, only about this big. They took those bayonets out, and they're eating the watermelons. In comes the commanding officer. What the devil are you guys doing? Every single one of them says, what does it look like we're doing? And he says, come on, we got to do this, that, and the other thing. He says, yeah, you would have seen a whole group of us going off. We all had watermelons in our backpack. So there are those stories, those human interest stories that go on and on. I'm sure what you experienced, Alan, you've got a few.
I mentioned that I had hired out the phone company. I used to climb telephone poles with hooks every day for a living, and now I'm down to a cane. But this cane is interesting. It has my length of service, what I was, MP platoon, the 4 campaigns, and on the back are the medals, French Legion of Honor that I received recently, the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. But I'd like to read this to you. Thank you. A veteran, whether active duty, retired, National Guard or Reserve, man or woman, is someone when, at one point in life, wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including my life. I thought that's quite touching. Just a quick humor story. I was outside of a German pillbox one night with a bunch of other fellows. It was black, you couldn't see a thing, and they were talking where they were from. Oh, I'm from Texas, or somebody's from Boston. Where are you from? Well, I'm from New York. What borough? Well, I really don't live in New York City. I live in Breesport, which again is like Jonesville. Well, whereabouts in Breesport? And, well, I really don't live there. Well, got my story all confused. I live in Elmira. Well, whereabouts in Elmira? Well, I really don't live there. It's out in the country called Breesport. Well, whereabouts in Breesport? Well, it turned out it was Freddie Allen who lived next door to my future wife. He had an attractive sister that I thought I'd like to take to a prom, and I asked Vera whether she'd go. No, I've already got a date, but here's Neva. Why don't you ask her? Well, how do you not ask a person who's standing right there? And saw her in a prom gown, pinned a rose on her, and 68 years later, she still looks pretty good. That's my story, and
I'll tell you, that's a nice one, Alan. I really say that those stories really hit the heart, because you had to have heart. And I will say to you, I look at the time that we spent together here, just, what is it, a half hour, 40 minutes? It flies by. I know we could go on and on and on. I want to say this is a new thing that Patriot Flight is doing. That the program is called Patriot Flight Honors Veterans. This is our initial day here. I will say to be continued for sure in some fashion or another. There are a lot of veterans out there. I've heard a lot of the comical stories. I've heard the ones that really spike the heart. We've got to do everything we can. When I say we, I mean, I'm the younger generation. When a generation, I guess, is every 30 years. And so I look at some of the veterans I'm dealing with, the World War II. I'm the one generation, and there's a generation below us. I want to be able to do what I can do in our small little corner of the world to recognize you people. Patriot Flight is like that. Patriot Flight is part of an honor flight network. Bill had started one of the first 2 in the New York State, Rochester and Albany. Currently there's 9 chapters. They're national networks. We want to do some different things. Happens to be I know a few veterans who will not go on the flights because they don't fly. Trying to get there, as Bill had said, is tough. Wouldn't dare think of a bus. I'd love a train because I've only been on a train once in my life, but still it's a long time, it's a long trip. Southwest has taken on this as a national sponsor as such. We do get a discount. We do need to raise money. As Truman said in a brief statement that freedom is not free. It doesn't come only with the blood and the courage of you people. It comes with, we need to be able to continue on if we're going to recognize. You got to have the courage and the endurance was part of the saying. For every free man and woman to keep freedom free. I hear from a lot of World War II veterans that you live in a time now, a different culture. It's different. It's not your world as it was. But we got to do what we can. And Patriot Flight is doing what we can because these people have character, and we got to carry that character. I really advance the whole school of community, whether it be a grade school, a high school, or colleges, to get the people involved. On our flight on May 10th, we had 3 teachers. We held the event at CBA High School. That's what's got to continue on with the memories, so they remember. I've heard from so many people, and I know this, it all depends on the program or the school or the teacher's thrust when it comes to history. They're missing an awful lot when they've missed you people. We encourage you people to come forward, whether they be the funny stories, the life stories, the loving stories. I met my wife, I met my girlfriend. I really say that Patriot Flight is being that community of veterans and patriots. We're going to do everything we can. The reunion last night was the first step. September 19th is another step to go down to the Times Union Center. I will say to you that everything that we do, and you do, to just come out and support us, because we want to support you. Alan, I can tell you, you've been such a great ambassador. And I kind of chuckle because Alan approached me in the 2013 D-Day event, and I guess we hit heart to heart. And I can't say enough. I've been to both their houses, spent time with them, I guess like a buddy does. I'd like a nice cold beer once a year during the summer. I don't drink as such. My doctor says I should drink more wine, but I don't. I just love being around you. You've got so much to offer, and I want to do what we can. Patriot Flight is going to do what we can to keep the memories alive. And I have to say, having you here today has humbled me, and I hope that it sent a message to everybody that sees this.
Well, I'll say this, Frank. When I had to leave Patriot Flight because of health issues and sheer exhaustion, I worried about how it would go, whether it would continue. I knew there was a lot more to do. And when you came to my house that day and I asked you a few questions, I knew you had a heart for it. And I knew that you would continue, and you've proven that to me. You have some growing pains, as you know, and it's going to happen. But veterans are getting to Washington, and I congratulate you on that. Thank you for doing that for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
A pleasure, Frank.
Thanks an awful lot. Believe me. Thank you.
Pleasure.
The frozen fifth.
That's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.